It says here the high-speed rail ballot measure. Who's going to take that one?
Only that the last time we talked about high-speed rail, Councilmember Brownrigg had said to his colleagues, should we be looking at the possibility of whether this council should be endorsing another ballot measure relative, statewide ballot measure, I believe it was, relative to whether or not high-speed rail should go forward. As you know, I think the surveys that are done rather extensively indicate that should another ballot measure be put before the voters, it would probably not be approved again. So we made the note to bring it back and just ask that question because you ran out of time last time. I don't know whether this is something you want to spend a lot of time on tonight or not, but or give us more direction. We're here to take that.
Councilman Brownrigg, do you want to make some comments?
I do think it's the right thing to do. I think the people of California know a lot more about the project, and I think the right thing to do, if I were in Sacramento, would be to say, let's make sure that we're on course in terms of what the people want. I think that to continue to harken back to what voters voted for in November 2008, when the project is now 3 times as expensive, half as big, and with one clear deficiency after another in the business model, not to mention the funding model. I mean, just as to put this in just one lunacy in perspective. So if you need $100 billion, the High-Speed Rail Authority assumes that over the next 10 years, $14 billion will come from California's cities and counties. $14 billion from our cities that can't afford to fix sidewalks and are having trouble with pension benefits. I mean, it's lunatic. At this point, they don't expect any private investment until 10 years out and $30 billion goes into the ground. So this is really just like the bank bailouts again, where the reward is privatized and the risk is socialized. So if it doesn't work, it's all on our nickel. But if it does work, then we'll sell it to the private sector and they can make the profit stream going forward. It's just a terrible, terrible idea. So it does seem to me that putting it to the voters is the right thing. I appreciate staff bringing this back as a question. I don't really have a proposal for council. From a public policy point of view, I think it's the right thing to do. Whether the council wants to say so or we don't want to, I just wanted to raise the question.
And I'd like to add on to that, if I may, Mr. Mayor. And since that time, since our last meeting, the Palo Alto Council has unanimously voted to oppose the project as it exists, and I don't know if you all saw the reports on that. And then the City of Atherton, who has sent out a copy of their letter today. My biggest concern is by allowing this to continue down the path is, first of all, the 3 years worth of time we've all put into it and our staff's put into it, and the $500,000 we've put into it. And until we just say stop this, that we're going to continue to have this cloud over our heads. And LaMalfa is the representative who is trying to introduce legislation which probably won't get past the democratically controlled legislature in California. I'm still skeptical that the governor will do anything about it, and I feel really strongly it's time for us to just say, this is not what we signed up for. And Burlingame's been saying this for 2 years. This is nothing new to us, but it's whether politically we want to take a strong stand. And I would encourage the council to take a strong stand because we continue to use our resources. It continues to depress our property values on the east side, if not the west side. There's no good in what they're proposing because they're not going to do it right because there's not even enough money. They say to do it wrong. The failures of the business plan, which we pointed out one aspect as a council, but Councilman Brownrigg has found several more that will be coming to the surface. And I would like Councilman Brownrigg also chime in about the peer review group, which I haven't had time to read that, but that was the latest announcement today. Their recommendation was due today, and he has actually read the peer committee that pretty much is stacked with people who support the project. I'll allow Councilman Brownrigg to explain it since he's read it, but I would like to make a strong stand, and that's End of story for me.
Yeah, Councilman Bryant, go ahead.
I'll very quickly elaborate. So it is an important milestone today. The peer review group, which as Councilwoman Baylock points out, is they wouldn't call themselves, strong supporters, but they're clearly were perceived as friends of the project. And today, so just as a quick reminder, the project proposes taking the $6 billion that they have between state money and federal money and building this 130-mile segment in the middle of the Central Valley. That segment would not be electrified. It wouldn't have rolling stock, so it really wouldn't be anything other than a big viaduct, a big piece of expensive hardware that even Amtrak isn't sure it wants for $6 billion. That's all the money they have, really. What the peer review group said today, most importantly, they said a number of things, but what they said most importantly was, we don't think the legislature should authorize a nickel unless you can build a full operating segment. Now, for the authority, what that means is instead of $6 billion for the 130 miles, they now have to find $30 billion to build from either Merced to Sylmar or Bakersfield to San Jose. And they don't have $30 billion. They don't have a prayer to get $30 billion. So the peer review group, that recommendation today will really be difficult, I think, for Sacramento to ignore. It is absolutely, from a financial point of view, absolutely the right thing to say, because if you don't have an operating segment, you don't have high-speed rail. So anyway, that's the report that Councilwoman Baylock is referring to.
Just to piggyback on that, I talked with a reporter today from the LA Times. They're writing an article on this specific issue, and they're in effect using our letter that was written regarding what the airport roundtable had found out and Michael had found out regarding the only, 3% reduction in airplane. So they're writing the article. They're going to send it to us when they finish it. But basically they're saying, we're hearing the same thing in Southern California that you're saying in Northern California. And we talked about the fact that I think that there should be something on the ballot to end the funding if our legislators don't defund it themselves. It'd be nice if they would just defund it. That would do it very quickly. The longer route is to go with a ballot measure. But we need to do something. As I explained to them, and we've heard so many times before, this high-speed rail as proposed will drain every drop of transportation money for years and years to come, and all we will have, it's like living in an old shack in a place, and you get a lot of money, so you buy a Cadillac, and the Cadillac's sitting out in the driveway in this old carport, and you got an old house, but you don't even have money for gas to take the car anywhere. That's not a good business plan. That's terrible, and that's basically what they're telling us. So, Councilwoman Nagel.
I concur that this plan makes less and less sense, but I think it was Assemblymember Hill who pointed out that the ballot measure would take, first of all, a long time to get there. I mean, we couldn't get it on the ballot before next November, right? And it would be very expensive. But the biggest problem is there would be so many construction companies, unions lobbying against it, and we've seen how they have been able to transform the popular vote with their, very heavily invested lobbying. So I'm not convinced that even though the people we know think it's a bad idea, that statewide it would go down. So it would be a lot of trouble perhaps for not the outcome that we wanted. What I would like to see, and perhaps we could schedule this for a future council meeting, is for us to take a position saying not just that we think the current plan really does not make sense, which I think we've said, but to say what we do need for transportation. I mean, we need that money for Caltrain. We need to connect our transit systems in the Bay Area better. We need the east-west connections. And if we could maybe start a movement to have the money reallocated to the places that it should have gone to in the first place, to me that would make more sense. It would be a more positive approach than just saying down with high-speed rail would be, let's spend the money where it should be spent.
Okay. Vice Mayor Keegren?
Well, I just say, if it came to a point, to put a ballot measure on it, it definitely would be worth investigating. However, I think Councilmember Nagel brings up a good point. It may not come out the way we want it to, even though there's been polling done. You just don't know with politics how that will turn out. I would hope our legislators would really look into themselves and make the common sense decision of, we're done. Too much money has been spent, and they cannot get the money to fund this project whatsoever. That would be the easiest way to go and the quickest decision, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. But I do feel we have to look at our other modes of transportation. If you don't use this money for high-speed rail, that at this point is going to be a failure, but use it, for example, maybe for Caltrain, to electrify our Caltrain, or look at the modes of transportation that we can improve. Why develop a new one that we know financially right off the gate that it's not going to work? Why spend money on something that is not going to be successful and doesn't bring us any benefit at this point? If they're going to do it, wait till you can get the money and actually do it right. Don't grab the money and just pay it as you go and hope for the best, because it's not going to work. I've been very frustrated with this. I commend especially Councilmember Baylock and Browner for all the work that you've put into this and the research and the analysis. But I just feel we've been talking about this way too long and haven't gotten anywhere. I'd rather look at what we really can use that money for that can be successful.
Yeah, so through the chair, the problem is, as long as this 1A is sitting out there and it's designated for this use, it's not going to be reallocated anywhere else. And until we stop that, right, there's no way to change 1A to make it do what we want it to do. And I feel like it just needs to be defunded and stopped, and it's a lot more work that way, but until the spigot's cut off with the money, they're never going to stop. And we've all wasted so much of our resources, and we're going to end up with nothing. And I feel we need to just stop and start over and put a ballot measure together that funds local transit. And hopefully we have legislators that will take that initiative up. But I feel like until we stop this, it's going to be hanging over our heads forever. We didn't think we'd be here 3 years later. Now it's going into year 4. And as long as they get a trickle of money out of D.C., they're going to keep going. So I just think we should draw a line in the sand and, just say, this is nothing that was promised. There's no way to make it into something that works. It's just the money's allocated a certain way. It's laid out in a way, as Dan Walter said in his column. They put safeguards into it, but it may be the safeguards that actually allow it from not being to be successful. And there's no way to fix it at this point because it's very detailed how the money has to be spent. $900 million of it can go to local transportation projects, but the rest of the $9 billion has to go to a high-speed train system, which we're going to argue is not what they're actually building anyways. But I think it's just a political statement. If we want to argue the odds of the ballot measure failing, there's 3 revenue measures on the ballot next November trying to raise taxes, whether they're income taxes or sales taxes, to keep the state alive. And if I were a special interest who wanted to see revenues raised, I'd be spending my money to get those ballot measures passed versus trying to save the unsavable. Whatever construction or unions or whatever who's going to be funding campaigns, they got to pick a couple ballot measures next November. They can't back them all. And what do I know? I'm not a campaign consultant, but I think they're going to be putting money into having a sales tax increase or an income tax increase and let this thing die its death because it's, I don't know. They have finite resources as well. So.
I just want to add one thing. I remember when we were talking about trees a few years ago, somebody made a statement, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Well, and that's true. So when was the best time to start something that would say, let's defund this thing? It's passed. We should, if we had done this a year ago, it might have been on this last November's ballot. We have to remember that it passed with a 52.6%. People were told it was $38 million, and now it's almost 138 million. Gee, I wish I would have got out of my piggy bank. It was 38 billion. Now it's almost 100 billion. That's a big difference. In 2008, when this was approved, the economy had not tanked like it has right now. So we're in a completely different situation. And yes, it takes time to have it approved, and it takes money, but it takes money not to do anything. It's taken a lot of money not to do anything. And I agree with Councilwoman Baylock. We have to do something. If we don't, they'll just keep playing the game that they've been playing, trying to hold us off as long as they can. They've got some huge linebackers, and they've been doing a good job. And I think it's time that we do something. And if that means writing a letter to our legislator and saying, listen, we've had enough. Let's get rid of this. I'm all for it. No. Councilman Brownberg?
Well, to try to bring this to an action point, first of all, we're fortunate that Senator Yee is represented in the audience tonight, and thank you for being here, not Senator Yee himself, but one of his staff. So obviously Senator Yee is one of our representatives, and it's nice that indirectly he's hearing this discussion. In terms of what we do, the question is whether, we all realize that a motion or a resolution from the Burlingame City Council is not, people are not living and dying waiting for our resolutions.
Come on, Michael.
But nevertheless, I do think there's a point. But perhaps, Mr. Mayor, what we ought to do is let the draft business plan process play out. They're expecting comments by January 16th. There's also the funding plan. There's also this LAO report. And maybe what we ought to think about is maybe 2 months from now, reviewing if we want to do a resolution about what our council's point of view on this is. And at that point, we could review whether we want to suggest that it be put back on the ballot or just take the more hostile stance of Palo Alto, which is to say, kill it. We could have that discussion maybe in a couple of months. Would that make sense?
That sounds fine with me, and I will have some personal contacts with our legislators also, because I think the one-on-one relationship that we have with some of those specific legislators is more important than a letter, because they see these letters all the time. So I'm willing to do that, and I'm sure the other council members are willing to do that also.
Through the mayor, I don't really see a reason to delay that action. We could draft it, and as Vice Mayor Keegren said, really the quickest way to resolve this is through the state legislators. So if we who have been a reasonable city and try to jump through all the hoops they said to jump through and answered everything with, if our city comes out and says, this is nuts, and we send that letter to all of the legislators, maybe that will have helped to have an impact sooner rather than later. I don't know why you want to delay it a couple months.
Well, I think Michael's, to put words in your mouth, he's looking for more ammunition, and believe me, there's a lot of it sitting out there with all these different reports coming in that are just going to add to it. So it can go either way. We could either write a letter a couple of weeks or we could wait a couple of months. I don't think it's really going to matter that much.
If I may, perhaps I could offer to work with Councilwoman Baylock to begin to block out. I guess I ask this as a question. It seems to me that perhaps a resolution in this context is more powerful than a letter, which kind of just disappears. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps I could undertake on the basis of this conversation with Councilwoman Baylock to come up with a simple statement. Maybe not shoot for the next council meeting, but maybe 30 days from now or something. Is that okay with you?
Just one additional comment relative to the conversation. As I hear the council talking, as you indicated, it's expensive to get a ballot measure on, but the state legislature can put that ballot measure on, so it doesn't cost us anything. So it seems to me one of the things you might think about is saying to our local legislators and our partnering cities is let's all go to our local legislators and say we want you to support legislation to kill it. If you're not comfortable with that, then we expect you to be comfortable with supporting legislation that puts it back before the voters.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a good idea. So we will leave this subject for a while. Councilman
Through the mayor.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Just one point. I mean, if you're going to do that, which I think is a very good idea, would it be worth maybe bringing that up to the PCC and see if we can get some other cities on board? And so they can do the same thing. So there's a little more ammunition.
So I have 10 days before we meet again if I want to get something on that. Can I just get some general themes here saying, number one, we'd like our legislators to stop funding this project, to reverse it or whatever, and short of that, then put it on the ballot. Is that the two basic themes we're saying?
Yes, because I know you have a short time period. At least if it was kind of introduced to them, this is what we're thinking, these are the two major themes, would you guys be on board with it? And then we'll send you a draft to look at it.
Is that and you, Councilman Brownrigg? Or?
Yeah, I mean, this becomes a bit of a nuance about how this stuff gets written. I think for Burlingame, which let's be honest, we get accused of being NIMBYs, that this is not about finance and not about transportation for the state, but it's about NIMBYism. So to me, I think it's a bit of a nuance. It's a little better for us to be arguing, put it to the voters. We're skeptical for these reasons. We have concerns. But I think if we say kill it, we run a risk of sounding like, well, really what we're talking about is we just don't want it right over here. But I mean, that's how I feel. I think it should be stopped. But you see the difference. I'm not sure that, I think maybe our argument, I think maybe as a city resolution, it's a little more powerful to say lots of questions, lots of stuff has changed, put it to the people. That's a moral high ground. Put it to the people. Let the people decide.
You could also say, or why don't you just go ahead and kill it now and save some money?
That's true too. All right. Well, why don't we try to draft something that works? You want to have a shot? And,
yes.
And your point is to see if we can get the PCC to sign on too. Sure.
No, I agree with that, and I think we've had these conversations with the PCC cities, and each city's been drafting its own letters and sharing their letters with each other so that each city would do the same thing. So if we come up with our version of what our points are, then I will share it with them at the next meeting. And the basic premise of the PCC is that we don't sign letters together. We share information and go back to our individual cities to write letters.
But at least it plants the seed.
No, I think the cities there would be more than happy to do the same thing, and
I'm sure they would.
I'm sure they would. I have no doubt in my mind. So,
but rather than just say kill it, perhaps it could be worded to say put the money. We would like to see the money go where it really is needed, and all this maneuvering is really just trying to do that anyway. Trying to fund the electrification of.
Well, of course it is. It's a red herring. It's just this roundabout way to get.
No, I know, but I mean, if they kill the funding, then they would have the authority to hopefully help the feds redirect the money where it should go. I mean, there's this money. It drives me wild. They're spending it on consultants, millions every week, and we can't stop the flow.
It's millions every day.
Mr. Mayor, I just have some observation from staff point of view. There are two things when you look at it from meeting the interest that you just highlighted as a council. First thing is in order for the legislature to respond to our interest, we need larger support from cities. So the best way to achieve that is to work with the cities as well as to contact majority of the legislators who are concerned about this project, and to basically take away the funding, the state funding in the next budget. When that state funding is eliminated in the next year's budget, then there is no money for the state to match with the federal money. The federal deadline is this year to spend that money, 2012. So that federal money evaporates. So there's no project from that point of view. So that's one of the most effective way. The second part is also, in order to bring that money home, we need to work with the federal legislators to request them that this project is unlikely to materialize with all these caveats, all these problems. So the best way, the best good this money can do to California is to spend it in the metropolitan areas where there are issues. The issues that we've been living for the last 20 plus years, both in Los Angeles as well as the Bay Area. So the best way, if we can work with both Northern and Southern California communities to see the reality of where this project is going and what would ultimately become of the federal money that was once promised, to at least get that money and put that money to some good use, which we needed a long time ago.
Okay, thank you. So I think we beat this dead horse again, right? Well, I wish it was a dead horse, but it's not. Let's see.